Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today we are here with another installment of Recent Reads. So I'm going to be covering books that I mentioned in my recent favorites video. This is not all-encompassing of every book I've read between my last recent reads and now. I do these kind of sporadically when I feel like I have more to say on some of the books I've read of late. So these are all books that I read in November, actually, of 2020. So I just thought I would share a little bit more of a detailed review of each of them for anybody interested. If you're looking to know more about these, if you're curious and you might want to seek them out to read them yourself, I like to think that it's helpful in that way. It also helps me to reflect on them, and if anybody has questions, of course, and I missed something or there's a question that you have that I maybe didn't touch upon, feel free to comment. And also, I would love to know what you are all reading lately. I love book recommendations and also just knowing what others are reading. I think it's very reflective of who we are, where we're at, and our interests. So without further ado, I have 5 books here, and I guess I am going to kind of create a sort of order to them, but we'll start with the first one that I actually finished in the month of November, which is Kabbalah Made Easy, Discover Powerful Tools to Explore Practical Magic in the Tree of Life by David Wells. So this is one I gave away in my recent giveaway for 1K. I had a personal copy, referenced it, never fully read it, but did so in the month of November and felt called to. I'm very interested in the Kabbalah, mostly as a tarot reader, because I like to use the correspondences of the Tree of Life and the Sephirah, and all that entails as a sort of lens to view life in a way, or to view existence. So I wanted to read this. It has a lot of amazing exercises for each of the Sephirah. It goes into detail. There are tarot correspondences, more thothy, mostly because the Kabbalah and the Thoth go together a little bit better or more seamlessly, especially as Crowley writes about it and intended it to be. So the author here actually does work with the Thoth Tarot. So if you're learning the Thoth or very new, this might be a great way to ease into it, especially as somebody who likes to use correspondences. The Kabbalah is a great one for numerology, spirituality, and all of the cards have some sort of connection that can be drawn and tied back to the Kabbalah, and then you can use those to kind of enhance your readings for yourself and others. So it starts with the idea of going through what the Tree of Life is, what the Kabbalah is. I like how it's personalized, and the author speaks to almost all of us having our own Tree of Life, and the way that we work with it and use it is going to be entirely unique to us. In a way, it's like we have our own tree that is separately just ours. And then, of course, there are elemental correspondences and aspects. So we have like the realm of we have all the various realms, which in their own way are like their own Tree of Life, like Atziluth and Yetzirah and Briah and Asaya. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing those correctly. Now, I've read a bunch on the Kabbalah. I didn't necessarily need to read this to enhance what if I was going to look to learn more about the Kabbalah, I probably would have picked a different book. But I liked this book because it felt like getting back to the basics, and also there was a lot of really practical, amazing exercises in here. So meditations that the author walks you through, tells you how to make a vision board for each one. If you are working with a various Sephirah, trying to learn all 10, he also lets you know how you might decorate an altar space or colors or a little almost like shrine for that thing. You get all of the many correspondences. And then, of course, there's the vision board. He takes you through various just exercises, meditative, that are a little bit more guided. And they are very, to me, reminiscent of journeying or astral travel. So anybody who's interested in those sorts of things, who's also interested in the Kabbalah and potentially the tarot, this just ticks a lot of boxes. So I'd highly, highly recommend it. I wouldn't say that I've done all of the exercises. I was more curious to read them and then feel inspired by them to go off on my own. But these are really user-friendly, and I don't think they're exercises that are at all too strenuous. They don't require materials. They just really require you to be present and to want to learn and know. And I just like his idea of the Tree of Life and the way he approaches it. I think this is very accessible and approachable. It doesn't get too heady or abstract. It's not overly esoteric. The language it's mostly in layman's terms, so there's not a lot of confusion, or not a lot of confusion even possible, I would say, for most readers. So this is a great place to start, because a lot of the books out there on these sorts of topics I know can be very heady, can be confusing, intimidating. In some ways, some books on these topics to me come off a bit convoluted and pompous, and I know that that's a very critical remark to say or make, and in a way I think I'm also directing it at myself because of course I'm interested in those texts at the same time, so that says something about me, right? But this one I really, really enjoyed, would highly recommend, and to the person who got this in the giveaway, I hope you're enjoying it as well. Trying to think if there's anything else to really sink my teeth into or share on this. No, it just goes through each of the Sephira. Toward the back is really just each one by one, but there are stories, anecdotes, exercises, ways of visualizing and understanding it that can apply to real life, so it's very practical. It's not abstract in any way. And then the beginning just lets you know and fills you in on this sort of primer, a bit of a history on the Tree of Life, so if you're interested in where it's derived from and its conception and foundations in the world, this would be a great one as well. So highly recommend, really, really loved it, and we'll probably reference it going into the future. Next, we have one tarot book here, and this is the Secrets of the Thoth Tarot, Volume 1, A Magical Atlas of the Universe, the Lima, Aeons, and the Major Arcana, by Marcus Katz, and then it also says, drawing on 35 years of study of the original notebooks and diaries of Aleister Crowley. So I have the other two volumes. This one only covers the Major Arcana of the Thoth Tarot. The volume 2 and 3 are both smaller than this one, so this one was a little over 300 pages. I know the other two are significantly shorter, and that the second one is a little bit shorter, and then the third one, which covers the court cards, is the shortest of them all. But I was curious to read this. I'd seen it mentioned on a few channels, I believe on Natalia from Ouroboros, and Hanny from Fierce and Pretty had talked about it. I, as you may know if you watch my videos, have read a bunch of Thoth books. I love Thoth books and learning and reading and researching, so I just figured I would probably tick the box where this series of volumes is concerned, and I am more now interested, after having read a bunch of books, in my experiential knowledge and approach to the Thoth, drawing upon those books, but not actively seeking out as much hardcore research. I've read enough books, I think, to the point where I can just move a little bit more freely for a while. So this series of volumes, I think, is the last one I'm going to read for a while, but this is not one I would recommend to beginners at all. So if you are interested in the Thoth, you've read the Book of Thoth, and you're familiar with a lot of Crowley's work, even outside of the Thoth, as a magician, as a practitioner, as somebody who was quite esoteric, the language is pretty straightforward. It's not too cryptic, but at the same time, the writing style is almost like an academic analysis or an academic essay, or writing on Crowley and the Thoth in general and the related subject matter. So the first portion goes into a lot of Crowley's and Lady Frida Harris's history of the Golden Dawn, of subjects like alchemy, sex magic, astrology, Kabbalah, all of that. It gets covered in, I would say, a surface level way for the very beginning portion of the book. The way that it's spoken about doesn't anticipate that a reader may not know these things, so it does kind of take into account that you are familiar with a lot of these topics, and if you aren't, you may get lost very easily and just decide to put the book down. So I'm glad I didn't read this right when I started my studies. Otherwise, I probably would have read it a little bit, felt intimidated or just off-put by it, and have set it down and probably not touched it for quite some time. So the beginning portion goes into all that. The reader clearly is very invested in the academic side of studying the Thoth and the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley and all of his magical subject matter. And then the chunk of the book that's mostly the middle is going into each of the major arcana, and that's pretty comprehensive. I wouldn't say it's teaching you how to read the cards. It mostly draws upon, this is mostly referencing other texts. It was a little bit disappointing in that it's constantly saying, oh, I can't dive into this fully here, I can't dive into this fully here, but here's what you should read. And the bibliography and appendices are massive, and a lot of it is saying and telling you to read other things that are going to apply to this. So it is a bit, I understand when there's a bibliography and when other texts are being referenced, but for the majority of a book basically telling you to go read other things and referencing things and just telling you to go read that, I'm like, well, I'm reading your book. I would like for you to speak to these things and give me a sense of where you're at or how you would incorporate it, even if it's just a short bit. So that was frustrating. A lot of it is just a compendium of references that this author recommends on the Thoth, the Kabbalah, astrology, related subject matter, history. So that was a little bit disappointing. It doesn't necessarily teach anybody the meanings of the cards or how to read them in a divination sort of sense. It goes into them in speaking to the symbolism, Crowley's history. So if you're interested in the Golden Dawn, Crowley, Lady Frida Harris, all of those things, and you want to know more about where they were coming from, there are a lot of great anecdotes and factoids in here about their lives and where they were, what they were inspired by. It dissects the Book of Thoth and the text within that. So if you want to know more, or there's secrets that maybe there are secrets in the Book of Thoth and in Crowley's writing that this author picks up on and chooses to illuminate and elaborate on, and that is something I thought it was really valuable for. I would say if you're reading this, don't stop at the appendix or where the appendices start. Read them. I think that actually one of my favorite parts was very short, but all the appendices to me were amazing. The first appendix, Appendix A, goes into the author's history in connection to Crowley and his work, which I would have liked at the beginning just because I think I would have felt more invested and understand why and where this author is approaching things from. But nonetheless, I think Appendix A was great for that. Appendix B was more sussing out secrets and subtext of the Book of Thoth and the Book of Law by Aleister Crowley. And I actually really enjoyed that because these are things I didn't pick up on or know of. This author attributes the idea that the word secret is said 22 times in the Book of Law, and that each sentence it's sort of right next to actually in order follows the major arcana, and then they show you what that is. And I thought that was super fascinating, or a great theory to have. And then they take time to go into the idea of all of the major arcana as aspects of the psyche and how that might apply in a reading. So some are better for the paths of the tarot. So we have like the priestess as aspirational elements of the psyche. So it all gets broken down. And then if you were to use them in a reading through that paradigm or lens, you might look to the psychology of a person. Really enjoyed that. So this was really towards the end where they got into styles of reading and how you might work with just the majors, or they do, I think, a 3-card and 15-card spread that was interesting, and they provide an example of an actual reading they did for a client, which I really enjoyed. So there were parts of this that felt a bit boring and a little bit convoluted, and I wouldn't recommend this to actually learn the Thoth, but if you are a Thoth nerd, if you are interested in all of those subjects, you will find something here that's really interesting. I will say it wasn't the kind of book I was so excited to pick up and delve into and read. There were a lot of slow parts, a lot of academic parts that trailed on for, in my opinion, a little bit too long. Would I recommend this? Yes, but not to somebody looking to learn the Thoth, not to a beginner, more to an academic or somebody who is very interested in these subjects and wants to know more about them. And yeah, a lot of this was like theory and analysis and critique of Crowley and his work. So the next 2 books I have, and I'll group them together, are Oracle Alchemy by Anna Cortez, illustrations by C.J. Freeman, and The Playing Card Oracles, a source book for divination by Anna Cortez, also illustrations by C.J. Freeman. Anna Cortez is I believe she published both of these. She's the writer of both. She has two playing card decks, 2 playing card oracle decks out that I now have and enjoy and love. And everything is illustrated by her father. He is passed away, unfortunately, so that's kind of sad. But these books are amazing, and it's really just that I was really interested in playing card divination, so I picked these up. In my opinion, in the few that I've read, this one right here is amazing. It uses, of course, Anna's decks, for example, and her system of playing cards. Playing card divination and cartomancy as it pertains to playing cards, I've come to find, is very subjective. There are not many overall consensus agreements on correspondences, numerology, elemental associations, all of that. It varies across the board. Whereas with tarot, I would say correspondences, imagery, baseline definitions, and card meanings are generally agreed upon. And playing cards, they don't seem to be, which is a little bit frustrating, but also interesting. And this book, Anna she uses illustrations of her deck. There is a section that goes through each of the cards, but they each only get about a page. The primary purpose of this book is not to give you just card meanings. And actually, when she gives card meanings, there are essays that accompany some of them, stories. So you're not just reading what she thinks of a card. You're hearing about her life. You're hearing about a story that her father wrote. And there are some excerpts of very creative and strange essays that her father wrote in here. I would say the beginning portion of the book goes into just the idea of card symbolism, how to use the cards, her history, and the majority of the book is actually various reading techniques, whether it be suit correspondences using geomancy, various spreads and techniques Anna uses with clients and on herself for card reading. So it sort of transcends the idea of even showing just spreads. Some of them have to do with very unique exercises that are meant to help with divination in the cards and plunging deeper, gaining your own associations and experiential meanings and wisdom in terms of the cards. So there's a lot in there. There's also a section on playing card history as it is known. There's a lot that is unknown, or there's a lot of, I would say, just a lot of guesswork associated with playing card divination and the history there. So she goes in it as best she can from what she knows. I know her father was very interested in that. I really loved the section on geomancy and the history. I enjoyed the sections on her history and also her experiences as a reader and how she recommends reading the cards and different exercises one can use. So if you're interested in reading with playing cards, this is great. I think it's even better if you do choose to pick up one of her decks because they will tie in and you'll be able to see the imagery she sometimes speaks to. But even if you're using just a basic playing card deck, you'll still get something out of this. If you are somebody who's just interested in the idea of divination and cartomancy and you want reading techniques and style, even if you're a tarot reader, I think this is great. You get a lot of different things drawn in. So this is kind of like you could use this as sort of like a one-stop shop for divination and playing card, divination, cartomancy. So highly, highly recommend it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing or leaving out. But yes, this book, I wouldn't recommend going to Amazon for it. It's not currently being sold in that way, so it showed it as being like $100-something even for a used one. It's not out of print. You can go to Anna Cortez's website and pick up a copy. That's where I got mine. You can get it for Kindle or on your laptop, which I also have. And then there's another website that stocks some of Anna Cortez's work and decks, and it's called, I think, Meow Wolf, something like that. And they also have the book. So don't go online trying to find it new on Amazon. It'll look like it's out of print and it'll look extremely crazily priced, but it's not. I think it's just that it's self-published now, and Anna will either sell it on her website or source it out to smaller kind of vendors. So just a word to the wise, I'll try to remember to link those both down below, but highly recommend this. And then there is Oracle Alchemy by Anna Cortez, the one that I just mentioned. I read this actually before I read this. And this is one that you can get on her website. I think this one's also available on Amazon still, and then it might be available on that website, Meow Wolf. I could be wrong. And this one is it's a shorter one. It is, half of it is a memoir about Anna Cortez and her upbringing, her connection in life, throughout her life, to playing cards. It was really something she had with her father, and he was quite an esoteric man. He was always illustrating things, and he used playing card divination and was a magician, a practitioner. He just seemed like a very eccentric and exciting and interesting individual, and it's so fun to hear how Anna spoke about him. And then she also goes into various struggles and periods in her life that she feels made her the reader that she is, and why playing cards and divination became so important to her. And so as anybody out there, even if you just are interested, but if you are a reader yourself or others, this will be fun because you'll see another person's life, but through the lens of reading cards. And so the memoir to me was so interesting. I like memoir and nonfiction in that way, so that was amazing. And then the portion towards the back is actually more of divination theory. So ideas on what it means to divine, of using it in an alchemical way to heal yourself and others. So it uses the lens of alchemy to approach card reading and how one might interact with the cards in a way that's very healing and transformative and can lead one to greater, I would say, feelings of purpose, of meaning, of all those sorts of things, of finding happiness, of finding a way to just exist that feels good. So there are some darker elements in here, I will say. So maybe, I'm not sure if there's anything that I would warrant like a trigger. Yeah, no, actually there is. I think for eating disorders, I think there's a bit in here on that. So if that's something that's very sensitive for you, just know that that's more in the memoir portion. But it was a really great book. And actually, I just love Ana Cortez's writing style, so highly recommend this. This is good, actually, even if you aren't into playing cards, because the divination part that's spoken about is not so heavily tied in with it. So if you're a tarot reader, an oracle reader that is not playing card related, you'll still really enjoy this and get something out of it. Even if you aren't interested in reading the cards at all, I think this has some sort of nugget for you in it. So highly recommend this. It's a nice short read, the kind that you might want to have a cup of coffee. It made me feel better about myself and the world. So yeah, have a nice cup of coffee, sit down on a weekend, and maybe get through this book. And then finally, I have Cartomancy and Folk Witchcraft, Divination, Magic, and Lore by Roger J. Horn. So this one was a really quick read. I read it in like one sitting. This is about playing card divination in terms of folk witchcraft and magical practice. This is written by a man who lives in America and who has a history, I believe a family history of folk witchcraft. It's approached more so in a Celtic pagan way, but I think that the idea of folk magic as a whole, there's a lot of similarities between various cultures and practices of folk witchcraft. There's something about it that is more informal, raw, earthy, that is messy and less concerned with the details and the steps and more concerned with the results and the practice. And also there's just something fun about reading about others' sort of magical practice and working. So this was part of what was starting to turn me on to the idea that there isn't a general consensus on playing card divination, that, for example, Anna associates the diamonds with fire, whereas this book will associate them with earth. I tend to agree more with Anna just based on my own correspondences, and that might also be me approaching it from a place of tarot, but that made more sense to me. And the spades being earth as a downward pointing thing that looks like a shovel, that made sense for me to associate with earth. Plus the fact that there's the red and black suits, and earth being traditionally a darker type of element and suit in color correspondence, it made more sense to attach spades. But this author actually goes into historical documentation of various meanings attributed. So they'll tell you that Mother's Bunch Golden Fortune Teller in 1857 had these correspondences. So there's like a little chapter on correspondences that have been documented on playing card divination throughout history in various areas of the world. And then they kind of give the disclaimer that it's changed throughout time, that many have had their own associations and meanings, and that theirs are their own. So at least there was that, and I did appreciate that. And then the back portion is all about using the cards in magic, traditionally more folk magic. So this could be for mediumship purposes, for manifestation and drawing in and the creation of certain things, for understanding aspects of life and others. And so in that way, I really enjoyed it. So if you're a practitioner of magic and you like to, it in some ways felt a little bit like a grimoire. It also was, I wouldn't say a magical cookbook, because they're not saying follow these exact steps to achieve these ends and through these means. It was more, this is what I recommend, this is how I do it, adjust as you will, but this is the kind of general idea of what we're doing here and how I do it. So I like it because I don't really like spell books and things that are very cookie cutter and just do XYZ and you'll get this, because that doesn't tend to work for most people. I think we need to have an aspect of ourself and our individual way of doing things incorporated into magic for it to be fruitful and beneficial and for it to actually turn out well. Apologize, the lighting's going way down right now. It seems to be getting cloudy, and of course it's now the winter, so we don't have much light. But highly recommend this book. It's a quick read, a one sitting, and if you're interested in tarot is referenced in here, and I think even if you aren't using playing cards, if you are interested in using cards and cartomancy in magic and you enjoy grimoires and just learning about different magical practices, this will be one for you. So definitely recommend. So I would recommend all of those. The only one that I would kind of offer a bunch of caveats to is Secrets of the Thoth Tarot, which I mentioned those caveats earlier. That brings us all the way up to date with the books I read in November, and I hope that that gave anybody watching an idea of what they're about and if you might be interested in them. So let me know what you thought. I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this was helpful or fun and you just enjoyed it. And until next time, bye.